20 years ago, the WWE attempted to cash in on the reality TV craze of the late 90s and early 2000s with their show Tough Enough. Much like elimination-based shows like Survivor, Tough Enough was a show where amateurs would have a chance to achieve their dreams of becoming a WWE superstar. Contestants would send WWE a demo video of their work in hopes of being invited to move forward in the process. Once selected, they would compete in a series of events in front of WWE representatives, best example being Al Snow, which would be present to critique, train, and deteriorate their feeble mindset that anyone could be a WWE champion.
Don't look at me with that hard look. I'll get out of this truck and whoop your ass.
Contestants would be eliminated either by simply not making the cut or not being able to handle the conditioning and lifestyle of the pro wrestling industry. The final contestant would earn a WWE contract, which is monumentous for obvious reasons. Tough Enough aired on MTV on June 21st, 2001, which was the perfect network for the series. Plenty of you probably remember the first Tough Enough winners being Maven and Nydia. On a quick note, this is a bad example because Maven knew he was going to win Tough Enough before the results even came in. Maven lasted decently well with the company and mostly became known as the amateur that eliminated Undertaker at the Royal Rumble with a beautiful dropkick, and Nydia for having a sex-filled relationship with Jamie Noble. Tough Enough sort of developed a mixed reputation. One reason for not having enough wrestling and a format that felt more of a dramatic boot camp than a wrestling competition. However, Tough Enough was pretty well received, sparking almost 2 additional seasons following the original. Tough Enough's success would continue on MTV until right around after Tough Enough 3, when WWE and MTV would no longer want to continue business. Al Snow, in a 2004 interview with WrestleView.com, stated that the company was in the process of working a deal with Spike TV to host the show for the 3rd season. One of the reasons the company wasn't returning with MTV was because they didn't have full 100% control on everything that went down. The deal with Spike TV never happened. Tough Enough 4 finalists would instead be a part of the SmackDown brand between October to December of 2004. This was supposed to correlate with Raw, which earlier that year held the first annual Raw Diva Search. So instead of being a 12-episode series, the season was limited to a 60-minute documentary, with most of the content just being live on SmackDown. But this event had the biggest prize to date, a 4-year contract with Sports Entertainment at $250K a year. The competitors selected would attend a 2-day tryout event in Venice Beach, California on October 15th, 2004. This event featured several gym and wrestling exercises that included bench pressing, cutting a promo, and a trial on the Optimum Fitness obstacle course. A few interesting things I learned about the tryouts that I want to mention is this. Brian Dinovich made it into the documentary after he suffered a torn pectoral muscle during the bench press event. Despite injury, he still took on the course in a very dramatic fashion.
I came out here today and I said no matter what, I am going to give it everything.
After dropping out of the event, the head of talent relations offered him a developmental contract on the spot. Sadly though, he would have a history of injuries that resulted in him being released, and he passed away on August 9th, 2018 at the age of 38. Marty Wright, aka the Boogeyman, actually tried out and allegedly made it into the final 8 at this event. However, it turns out that he lied about his age.
You lying to us?
30.
What's your license say?
30.
What does your birthday say in your license?
64. That's right, I am 40. That's right, and just to prove to you young bucks.
I think you're a tremendous athlete. You look great. We can't stand lying. It's one thing we don't have. Your cut.
Just give me a chance.
And the cutoff point was 35. WWE, however, offered him a developmental contract as well, and he trained in January and June of 2005 and was added to the OVW roster, which was a rather beneficial opportunity since OVW has been known for training some of the best superstars that worked for WWE, like Brock Lesnar, John Cena, Randy Orton, the list goes on. Andrew Hankinson, aka Luke Gallows, aka Doc Gallows, tried out for this season, but he failed to make it into the finals. He would later get signed by WWE Developmental, and he would later compete as Festus. This would later evolve into a deep lore on how his relatives enabled his alcoholism, and he joined CM Punk's Straight Edge Society, one of my favorite wrestling arcs in the PG era. I also want to mention that the theme for this event was Getting Away with Murder by Papa Roach. That is all. So following the Optimum Fitness obstacle course, they broke the contestants down to a final 8. They were then taken to train at Track's training facility in Stamford, Connecticut, which if you guys don't know is where the headquarters of WWE is located. John Meyer would actually quit the competition due to being unable to keep up with the endurance training. On October 28th's episode of SmackDown, the final 7 would make their appearance. They all entered the locker room where a heel Big Show put them in their place.
This is hallowed ground. Everybody in this locker room paid their dues to be here. You miles have it.
Show could not stand these degenerates making their presence in the locker room. And apparently, Puder looked all balled up, ready to fucking fight, and Show pushed him into the locker and demanded that he leave. That night, the 7 would cut a 20-second promo on Big Show, after in which Big Show came out and they would have to sell a body slam. On November 4th's episode of SmackDown, the final 7 would compete in a series of challenges. One was where they were sprinting up and down a parking ramp over and over and over again. And then following that, they would have to eat a whole large-ass bowl of Alfredo-esque pasta. I know it's Alfredo, guys. And a bottle of whole milk. Ryan Reeves won this since he was actually known for having an insane appetite in the documentary. But later that episode, the 7 would come out for their next challenge, which led to the entrance of Olympic gold medalist Kurt Angle. Oh yes, it's the Daniel Puder shoot incident. So let's say it like this. Okay, so Angle comes out and begins to talk trash to competitors.
Oh, yeah. Hey, you're the UFC guy, huh?
Yes, sir.
You ever fight an Olympic champion?
Sir.
You don't want to because I'll beat your
Announcing that there's going to be a squat thrust competition. The winner wins a special prize. Puder would end up making it into the final 2 until being unjustifiably eliminated, losing to Chris Naraki. I say that because Chris Naraki was absolutely awful at keeping up to the pacing of the squat thrust, and comparatively to Puder, who actually stayed rather consistent during it. His prize was a match against Kurt Angle. This would only take seconds for Angle to assert his dominance with a pin. Though Rocky actually ended up fracturing one of his ribs during this match.
I didn't know when Chris's ribs were hurt. These guys don't even realize what's in front of them.
Heated by his defeat, Puder actually stepped up to the plate.
You want to get in the ring?
I guess Kurt's not
You
through.
want to get in the ring with me? Get your in the ring.
So Puder and Angle began to lock up, and Angle took the initiative while Puder began to resist.
Now, I had him, and all I had to do, and I would never do it because I didn't want to hurt any of the guys, I could have thrown him right on his head because both of his hands were locked. So all I had to do is go backward, just throw him right on his head. Instead, I brought him in the middle of the ring, and you can see it on video. I dropped him my knee, and I dropped him nice and easy to his back.
However, Puder had Angle in a Kimura lock, a highly dangerous and painful arm lock. With Puder on his back, the referee Jim Corderas actually quickly counted the 3 count.
Contrary to popular opinion, nobody's talking to me in my earpiece. I think they're just as surprised as everybody else. The only thing I heard was, Jimmy, what's going on? And I did the old, I don't know. He's going into business for himself here, you know. But when he put on what I later found out was known as a key lock, I knew that the move was not good. How do we end this without making our big star look bad? And when they fell, Kurt fell on top of Daniel Puder. Even though Daniel had him in the key lock, I counted 3, but upon further review, thinking back, they were having an amateur type contest. I could have just counted 1 because in amateur wrestling, that's all you have to do. I was counting 3 regardless. This thing was going to end, even though Puder got his shoulder up after 2. I'm counting 3. I don't care.
This would have been very problematic, because Angle could not tap out to a tough enough competitor. It would be humiliating for a veteran or former champion to tap to an amateur like this. After the 3 count, Puder went for a handshake, and Angle was visibly upset. He stated to Puder,
I said, you know what? You're a stupid son of a bitch. He said, why? I said, because you pinned yourself. I said, this isn't an ultimate fighting competition. I said, this was a wrestling match. And he goes, well, you're allowed submission. I said, yeah, but you pinned yourself, you stupid bastard. I said, now get out of my ring.
It turns out that this segment was actually unscripted and was Vince McMahon's idea.
We try to, as much as possible, work everything so that we don't allow for outcomes that we can't control in a public setting. Vince wanted Kurt to go out there and wrestle them all. And I was like, I would suggest you don't do that because these are all young, healthy, strong guys.
On November 11th edition of SmackDown, it would mark the first SmackDown to eliminate a contestant. The event for this SmackDown was called the Tori Wilson Sex Test. The contestants would dress up all snazzy, but ultimately Nick Mitchell would actually be the one to get eliminated, as he walked out in just jeans with ass pockets cut out on his birthday.
It's upsetting, but it happens, and it's my birthday today, so.
The event began where Tori Wilson stated the contestants had to make out with a WWE diva, and you could imagine where this is heading. WWE legend Mae Young comes out. Puder, who dressed in a spiffy white suit, actually didn't mind because he likes older women.
I love older people.
Look at Puder! God,
he's tough enough, Cole, I'm telling you.
Puder actually won this match and was rewarded with a lap dance, and his response was this.
Then she gave me a lap dance, which I think is awesome because nobody's ever going to get a lap dance from her again.
On November 18th episode of SmackDown, another contestant was sent home.
But before we find out who was eliminated, Chris Naraki.
No, I will not quit.
The eliminated contestant is Chris Naraki.
This wasn't surprising to the contestants. Naraki didn't really sell all that well during the squat challenge and his match with Angle. The 5 finalists entered the ring for their next challenge. This is when the Basham brothers would come out. Contestants basically had 30 seconds to get past them and grab the flag on one of the turnbuckles. None of the contestants were able to do this. Puder got a little bit close, and I think another contestant got pretty close too. However, no one really won. Reeves actually suffered 2 broken ribs during this event. On November 25th episode of SmackDown, Daniel Rodheimer would actually be the next to be eliminated, leaving 4 competitors left. And this week, the 4 would compete in an arm wrestling tournament. Miz would end up being clobbered by Puder, and Reeves and Justice was actually kind of a close match until Reeves actually took leverage and won. The last match, despite having smaller arms, Puder defeated Reeves, no problem. On the December 2nd episode of SmackDown, all the contestants voted for Daniel Puder to be eliminated, due to him having his head up of Al Snow's ass, and how much Puder uptalks himself. The crowd actually ended up voting for Ryan Reeves. They would then all dress in drag for the next event. Justice wore some Donkey from Shrek slippers, Miz wore a croc top Metallica shirt, and Puder, he wore a small ass skirt. Hardcore Holly ended up coming into the ring, and the final 3 had to flirt with Holly, who was not having any of it. On December 9th episode of SmackDown, Justice would be the one eliminated from the final 3, making Mike and Daniel the final 2 competitors. The 2 would compete in 2 events. One was trying to knock each other off of an inflatable pedestal. The whole ring kind of looked like a bounce house, just without walls. Puder would actually win effortlessly twice in a row. The second event they would compete in would be at the upcoming pay-per-view, Armageddon. So the final 2 would face each other at the Armageddon pay-per-view, but not in a traditional wrestling match, but a regulated boxing match called a Dixie dogfight. And this honestly seems so unfair for The Miz. Puder has MMA experience with UFC experience under his belt, and The Miz, I mean, yeah, he's already made a name out of himself in the independent circuit and being on MTV's Real World, but that has nothing to do with boxing. So this was on December 12th, 2004. And the experience gap is very clear. Miz flails himself across the ring as Puder has technique and good pacing. Puder ended up slipping, resulting in Miz to get a solid punch on him. But a few seconds after, however, Puder accidentally gave Miz a rabbit punch, or a blow to the back of the head.
He was moving. I thought he was going to turn around, come right back at me. They didn't split it up. You barely touched him because as soon as I saw he wasn't going to turn around, I pulled it.
This is illegal in fighting because the back of the head isn't protected by the skull. Miz ended up getting gassed out, meaning his body wasn't able to send enough oxygen to his muscles, resulting in him being heavily fatigued and slow. So Daniel Puder ended up winning the match by decision, which, once again, I'm not surprised. It didn't mean that Puder won tough enough, however, he may as well have. So the crowd would finally vote who would be truly tough enough on December 16th episode of SmackDown. Despite Puder's skepticism that Miz was actually winning in the polls, it turns out Daniel Puder was the one that won. And following this, he was welcomed with an entry in the 2005 Royal Rumble, which would be his in-ring debut with WWE, and this led to the notorious Royal Rumble 2005 hazing incident. The 2005 Royal Rumble would feature the starting participants as Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero, which I think is really sick to have those two starting up. So he entered the ring and exited immediately, and then rushed to a mic so he can cut a really lame promo about being the first tough enough champion to win the Rumble. But then Benoit and Eddie look at each other like, you seeing this guy? They stop attacking each other and then begin cornering Puder as he entered the ring. First, Benoit gives him a chop, and then he kicks him. Eddie then kicks. Benoit then kicks. Eddie's then chops. Benoit chops even harder. Eddie's like, bro, check this out. Aim for the head or some shit, and chops Puder. Benoit's then like, I got this next one, and chops Puder hard again, then kicks Puder's falling sandbag corpse. They then give him a double suplex. I don't know what gesture this is, Benoit, but okay, we'll count that. He then does a back suplex. Eddie then gives him a Three Amigos, and finally, Hardcore Holly enters. You think Puder is safe? We already know Puder is not fucking safe, okay? Holly then enters the ring and tells Benoit and Eddie to let him beat up Puder and eliminate his entitled ass. The crowd is cheering their ass off, and honestly, I kinda am too. Holly whips the shit out of Puder, and he does this 2 more times, then Benoit chops him. Benoit then holds Puder down as Holly chops him, and then vice versa. Benoit then points at Eddie, and fucking Holly holds Puder down, and then Eddie's chops fucking Puder, and the crowd's so fucking lit about it. So Holly would do just a couple more moves, and then he would throw Puder out of the ring, thus breaking any opportunity he ever had for a title. And then Holly got eliminated. My Zach Gowen video, I talk about how Gowen joined the locker room prematurely, and it meant that he really wasn't in tune with the locker room etiquette, and that resulted in the locker room not giving him respect. This was similar to Puder, but instead of being a teenager with absolutely no experience in the industry, Puder was considerably arrogant and developed a negative reputation due to his shoot with Angle and his rabbit punch on The Miz. The locker room just didn't respect Puder, which led to the hazing incident at the Royal Rumble. Hazing is defined as any action taken or any situation created intentionally that cause embarrassment, harassment, or ridicule to members of a group or team, regardless of that person's will. In this situation, Daniel Puder wasn't being hazed because of the initiation, but rather disrespect. Puder was considerably arrogant for his attitude prior to this match, stating that he was in the main event at the Royal Rumble.
And they said, that's not the main event.
In wrestling, you are either considered a jobber, a mid-carder, or a main eventer. In a literal sense, yes, the Royal Rumble is the last match on the pay-per-view and therefore the main event. However, in the field of wrestling, it's not considered a main event. Main events are for strictly main eventers and not jobbers, which is what a majority of the participants in the Royal Rumble are. If one of those jobbers state that they are in the main event, they're giving off a message that they are a main eventer, and in Puder's case, this is just not true. So following the Royal Rumble, Daniel Puder was immediately sent to OVW for training. He made his debut in OVW on July 27th, 2005. Here he wrestled with the likes of Mr. Kennedy and Chris Benoit. Puder was a great MMA fighter, but he was an awful wrestler. In my view, he was good at selling the MMA moves that he had, but you rarely saw him do anything beyond that. WWE just probably had no idea what to do with him. They just weren't impressed by Puder's performance. WWE offered to cut Puder's contract from $250,000 a year to about $70,000. Puder declined and left the company. In an interview with Hannibal TV, Puder criticized WWE for being a multi-billion-dollar company that couldn't afford his contract. He attempted to file legal action against them but was unable to secure a deal with several law firms. Following OVW, Puder was interviewed by Yahoo Sports, where he stated that, "I was in OVW, and we had this one town in Kentucky we went to every week. It was basically an old barn. There were the same 20 people there every time. They all looked the same. They all had maybe 3 teeth each, and they all had the same name. Finally, one night I walked in and saw all the inbreds and thought to myself, what am I doing with my life?" Following his employment at WWE, Puder would continue to explore pro wrestling. Puder ended up getting signed by Ring of Honor, where he made his debut on December 29th, 2007. He wouldn't last all that long though, because he would get released in January of 2008 due to budget cuts. He also wrestled in New Japan, where his most notable match being against Shinsuke Nakamura. They then became tag team partners and competed in a tag team tourney for most of his time there. In my opinion, I think Puder sold to me a little bit better, but I feel like it's the same problem as before. Like, he's selling these really nice looking MMA moves, but I'm not seeing any suplexes. Alright, anyway, he was with New Japan until 2011. Daniel Puder had a record of 8 wins and 0 losses in MMA. Kurt Angle actually criticized that the reason he is undefeated is due to Puder being a selected fighter. Despite Angle's feelings in regards to some of Puder's comments, he had very little against him. Angle was actually interested in doing a feud with Puder based off of the shooting incident. Puder actually offered to fight Angle in MMA, and Angle was actually up for it. However, Angle's doctor said he was in any condition to actually fight, which I genuinely believe. Puder was scheduled to compete against Tank Abbott on February 26, 2011. However, Puder withdrew due to a torn meniscus. Abbott criticized Puder for his withdrawal.
And then I showed up in the rain on a Harley, in shape, and he realized that he was going to face a real fighter, and then he hurt his knee. That's a bitch.
Puder's response was that he laughed and he asked, "Tank in shape?" Puder all his life was bullied by his peers, and this in a sense motivated Puder. He spent his life proving the people that hurt him wrong. In my opinion, Puder won Tough Enough 4 not because he was a good, charismatic performer, but because he dominated physical challenges that had very little to do with wrestling. Arm wrestling, cardio, strength tests, a boxing match, all of these complement his training as a mixed martial artist. But after he won Tough Enough, it was made clear that WWE is not UFC, and therefore he was rejected by the company. Despite not making it with WWE, Puder achieved quite a lot afterwards. Puder founded the organization My Life, My Power, which works with police departments, schools, parents, and youth to help strengthen communities and to provide effective programs to combat bullying through self-esteem, self-empowerment, and body image. He also founded Puder Strength Training, which is a non-profit organization that donates strength training equipment to high schools. He even opened up his own gym, the Knockouts Hollywood MMA Gym in Hollywood, California. Puder now makes his living in law enforcement as a deputy sheriff. Following Tough Enough 4, here is what happened to some of the competitors. Ryan Reeves signed a developmental contract with WWE. He later participated in the first season of NXT in early 2010 under the name Skip Sheffield and became one of the original members of the faction, The Nexus. He resurfaced on the main roster in early 2012 under the ring name Rhineback and headlined 5 pay-per-view events. Daniel Rodheimer signed a developmental contract with WWE as well and later wrestled on Heat as Dan Rodman. Nick Mitchell signed a developmental contract with WWE. He made his debut on the main roster in 2006 as Mitch, a member of the male cheerleader group, the Spirit Squad. Oh yeah, you remember that. Justice Smith would later appear in the 2008 revival of American Gladiators under his first name as his gladiator name. Out of every Tough Enough wrestler, I think that The Miz was considered the most successful, being the only contestant to win the title and headline WrestleMania, which I find is kind of ironic because the whole point of the contest was that the winner was going to win $1 million, but none of the contestants became millionaires because Puder really only made it past the first year. Before I end the video, I want to thank you guys for being patient and supportive on the channel. For those that don't know, my apartment flooded in late July, and it's been a couple rough months, you know, and it required me to take some time to figure everything out. So I'm currently working full time to help, you know, get myself out of debt. So bear with me on the slow uploads, please. Shout out to that one guy in Canada for donating. Yo, dude, you're based. If you guys want to support, feel free to donate in the link below. I'm also working on the Patreon. I mean, I have everything set. I just gotta launch it, you know. All right, but until next time, guys. Take care and have a good one.